Prepare the bath with hot water was the request from my husband, who had vanished 3 years ago. When he unexpectedly called me for the first time in ages, he had left me abruptly, leaving behind divorce papers, and eloped with his mistress. The pain I felt that day 3 years ago was immeasurable. I couldn't fathom the audacity of his call now, but I've changed since then. I understand, I replied calmly, suppressing my anger as I hung up the phone. I couldn't help but wonder what my husband would be like when he returned home. I hoped he would feel the same pain I did back then. Suck it up, I thought to myself. My name is Mary, 30 years old with an office job. I met my husband Dean through a social networking site. It all began when I discovered Dean was organizing a meetup for fans of my favorite band. Being unfamiliar with anyone who shared my passion for this less-known band, I reached out to him. The meetup venue was conveniently close to my house, so I impulsively messaged Dean. He responded politely, providing directions. Dean, as the moderator, ensured the event was lively, making me feel at ease amidst strangers. Though nervous, Dean's presence made the meetup enjoyable. We clicked instantly, realizing we shared similar tastes not only in music, but also in other aspects. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and I found myself drawn to him. After parting ways with others, Dean and I continued talking as we traveled on the same train. We discovered numerous commonalities, and I felt a burgeoning affection for him. Agreeing to meet again, I left the train, eagerly anticipating our next encounter. Our messages grew frequent, and a month later, at a concert, Dean confessed his feelings. I blushed with surprise and joy, thinking my affection for him had been one-sided. Every day since then, being with Dean has brought me nothing but happiness. Dean is an incredibly considerate person, always careful not to say anything hurtful. Countless times, he surprised me with gestures that brought tears to my eyes because his priority was my happiness. I felt like I could do anything for Dean in return. After a year of dating, we decided to tie the knot. His proposal took me completely by surprise. During a dinner at a restaurant, he suddenly presented me with a lavish bouquet of flowers, and as I accepted, our mutual friends emerged to share their congratulations. It was a moment of pure joy, and I couldn't help but cry tears of happiness. Even after marriage, Dean and I maintain a romance, seemingly unaffected by the change in status. Despite his demanding job, Dean actively participated in household chores and made grand gestures for our wedding anniversaries and birthdays. I was grateful every day to be married to such an amazing man. However, after 2 years of wedded bliss, Dean began to exhibit strange behavior. While he had always been busy with work, his workload seemed to escalate. He started working overtime, even on holidays, and traveled more frequently than before. There were days when I hardly saw him, and nights when he returned home long after I had fallen asleep waiting for him. One night, out of concern for his health, I suggested he take some time off from work. His response was unexpectedly cold, the first time he had ever spoken to me in such a manner. It was then that I realized something had changed in him. Dean's transformation became more evident over time. One morning, he scolded me for not having breakfast ready at an ungodly hour, displaying an unreasonable level of anger. It was bewildering and hurtful, especially considering I had never imagined he would even think to be upset about such a thing. I, too, have a job, and naturally, the housework isn't always perfect. I was so stunned by Dean's reaction that I zoned out for a while. Perhaps I shouldn't be so engrossed in my work. I realized I needed to put more effort in the household chores and wait for Dean to settle down at work, hoping he would return to his former gentle self. I firmly believed that one day he would, so I did everything in my power to make our home a peaceful sanctuary for his return. But despite my efforts, Dean continued to give me the cold shoulder. Even though my heart felt like it was breaking, I persevered, trying my best to maintain the household. One day, while checking Dean's pockets for items to take to the cleaners, I discovered a pair of women's earrings, obviously not mine. The moment I laid eyes on them, I became convinced that all of Dean's previous actions had been a facade. He wasn't busy with work. He was meeting his affair partner. That explained why he was never home. Feeling foolish and utterly miserable for caring so deeply about Dean, I stayed up that night, waiting for his return. When he finally arrived in the morning, I confronted him about the earrings. "Whose earrings are these?" "They were in your suit pocket." I tried to keep a calm tone, hoping for a rational discussion, but Dean's response was nonchalant. "Oh, they belong to my girlfriend." "Thanks, I'll return them tomorrow." His indifference stunned me. There was no hint of remorse or panic, as if having an affair was normal. Unable to contain my emotions, I accused him sharply. "You're not even going to apologize, or acknowledge that you're doing something wrong. We're married, aren't we?" Dean's retort was swift and cutting. "Shut up. You're the cause of this mess." As he stormed towards the bathroom, I realized I hadn't heated the water in the tub, a detail no wife would prioritize during such a confrontation. But Dean's accusation echoed in my mind. "Why haven't you heated up the water? Can't you even do that?" I was at a loss. He showed no intention of discussing or ending the affair. There were so many words I wanted to say, but they seemed futile. Unable to muster a response, all I could do was cry. In silence, I retreated to the bedroom, tears streaming down my face. Morning came, and Dean was nowhere to be found. Had he left in anger? Stunned, I returned to the living room, where I discovered something shocking on the table. There it was, a divorce document signed by Dean, accompanied by a short letter that simply read, "Goodbye. Sign these and send them out." I frantically tried to reach Dean, but he refused to answer my calls, leaving me unable to contact him. Could a couple really end things so abruptly? Was it fair for me to place blame on him that day? I took time off work and reached out to my in-laws, but even they couldn't get through to Dean. None of our mutual friends had any luck reaching him either. To my surprise, I discovered that he had resigned from his job 2 weeks prior. In hindsight, it seemed too coincidental for divorce papers to be prepared in the dead of night. This had been planned. Life after that became a blur. I no longer found solace in the songs of my favorite band, and work became an impossibility as I took a leave of absence. Emotional wounds festered, imprisoning me within the confines of my own home for months. Concerned for my well-being, my mother came to stay with me for a while. 3 years passed before I could even fathom returning to a semblance of normalcy. Perhaps, just maybe, I could begin moving forward again. And then, as I was beginning to entertain this notion, the phone rang one evening while I was cooking dinner at home. An unknown number flashed on the screen, filling me with apprehension as I answered. To my disbelief, it was Dean's voice on the other end, a voice I never expected to hear again. My heart raced with shock. And there he was, on the phone, uttering those words. "I'll be back tomorrow. Get the hot water ready in the bath." I couldn't comprehend it. Had he forgotten everything that happened 3 years ago? How could he return and face me after all this time? The confusion and hurt swirled inside me, but instead of voicing my myriad of thoughts, I simply replied, "I understand," before hanging up the phone. The following day, Dean called again, his voice laden with fury. "What happened to our house? It's still our house, right? Explain this to me," he demanded. But I was bewildered. "Our house. That's my house," I retorted. Dean's anger flared even more. "You forgot to boil the water in the bath too?" he accused, unleashing his frustration on me. "You're not my husband anymore, Dean," I asserted firmly, feeling the weight of those words. Turning around, Dean caught sight of me, my in-laws, and my lawyer. Panic flickered across his face as he lost his grip on the phone. "Why are Mom and Dad here?" he stammered, attempting to flee, but my in-laws and the lawyer closed in around him, leading him towards the lawyer's office. Ignoring his protests, we made our way to the office, where Dean was seated. "Here are the documents regarding alimony," the lawyer stated matter-of-factly, despite Dean's protests about not having the money. In a fit of rage, Dean tore up the papers, but the lawyer produced more copies, prepared for such defiance. You should pay alimony to Mary for cheating on her and causing her emotional distress, the lawyer asserted sternly, fixing Dean with a cold glare. Dean attempted to deflect. Let's just move on with our lives. What about the house? But the lawyer remained resolute. Mary's heartbreak cannot be mended with money, but it's the least you can do. Dean's attention shifted to me and my in-laws. The house is mine. Have you forgotten everything after 3 years? I don't want the house we shared anymore, he declared bitterly. So, I made the decision to tear it down and turn it into a parking lot, Dean declared, referring to the house where we once lived together. Originally, the property belonged to my parents, who had passed it down to Dean and me, though it was in my name. You got it from your parents, so it should be in your name, Dean stated, conveniently forgetting that detail. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook. I don't remember you having any ownership claim, I shot back, refusing to be swayed by his demands. Dean persisted. If you're going to turn it into a parking lot, you better split some of that revenue with me, right? I couldn't help but scoff at his audacity. How long are you going to keep up this charade? What you did is unforgivable, I retorted, my patience wearing thin. You're 30 years old and still don't realize it. You're a good-for-nothing, I added, feeling a surge of anger and frustration. My father-in-law intervened, delivering a verdict on Dean's behalf. You're right. The only thing left for you to do is pay alimony and disappear from our lives, he declared, his tone unwavering. As I watched Dean's crestfallen expression, I couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction. There's no way we're starting over, I asserted firmly. You served me those divorce papers, remember? Besides, I'm already remarried, I declared, introducing my lawyer and now husband Jude. Dean was visibly shaken by the revelation, his demeanor shifting from defiance to despair. Don't say that, Mary. I'm sorry, let's start over, he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. But I stood my ground. It's too late for that, I replied, my resolve unwavering. Just sign the papers and leave. With a defeated sigh, Dean begrudgingly complied, signing the documents as instructed. Can we please just split it up? He pleaded, his voice strained with desperation. But my father-in-law remained resolute. No one is doing you any favors. Make sure you pay her on time, he admonished sternly. With that, Dean hastily gathered his belongings and fled from the office, leaving behind a palpable sense of relief in his wake. My in-laws apologized profusely for his behavior, and Jude assured me that he would ensure Dean paid his alimony promptly. True to his word, Jude navigated the legal process with finesse, ensuring Dean paid a lump sum as alimony. According to Jude, Dean had no savings and was scraping by with a day job. It turned out that he had been living lavishly off a wealthy woman, but she eventually grew tired of him and kicked him out. With the alimony settled, I cut off all communication with Dean, focusing instead on enjoying my honeymoon with Jude. He never complained about my imperfect housework, always offering his support and understanding. Together, we found joy in the simple pleasures of life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly content. As we embark on this new chapter together, I find solace in the fact that I am no longer bound by the chains of the past. With Jude by my side, I can finally embrace the future with optimism and hope. And for that,